Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Pil-ho, The Dawning Rage, a Korean crime drama thriller from 2019 that stars Sun-kyun Lee. It was directed by Jeong-beom Lee, the man who previously directed The Man from Nowhere and No Tears for the Dead. So on the run from an internal affairs agent, a corrupt cop, played by Sun-kyun Lee, reluctantly teams up with a defiant teenage girl to unravel a conspiracy. So the opening scene shows a young man who is breaking into an ATM machine, and as it turns out, he's working with Sun-kyun Lee's character. So Lee goes back to work the next day as a cop, and internal affairs is all up in his grill, because they have an idea that he's dirty. So they threaten to take him down for his corrupt activities. And on top of all this, his underworld contacts who are doing these shady deals with him desperately need some money to continue financing their projects. So our protagonist is kind of in a bad place. And then certain events happen that put him in an even worse place. So he investigates the suspicious events surrounding a warehouse fire that he's directly connected to. So there are actually a few surprises early on in this film, and we are eventually introduced to a really bad criminal and his henchmen. And after the opening 30 minutes, I would say that the story gets a little bit convoluted, kind of jumps around and ropes in a few side characters that are not that interesting, but thankfully it does recover fairly quickly when some key information is revealed about the mystery of the warehouse fire. It's pretty good stuff, and it helps to develop the main conflict, and the film kind of refocuses itself pretty quickly. There's some irony at play as well. For example, I found it interesting that one particular character unknowingly destroys a piece of evidence that could have helped him prove his innocence. So all in all, I think that the conflict in The Dawning Rage works pretty well. Then near the midpoint, the focus shifts more towards kind of building the friendly relationship between our protagonist and the teenage girl, who gets kind of roped into things. I liked that aspect of the film as well. They both have an attitude problem. Both of these characters have some attitude, and they kind of clash a lot. They have a butting of heads, but the actors have really good chemistry together, and there are some genuinely charming moments as they investigate these events. Sun-kyun Lee is one of my favorite Korean actors, so it's no surprise that he's really good in this. But newcomer Soni Jun, who only has a few acting credits to her name, makes a big impression herself. This is another one of those younger actresses to look out for. But the main thing that I want to communicate in this review is that this film, The Dawning Rage, has a dramatic core to it that I was not necessarily expecting after watching the opening half. And that's a testament to this director because he's willing to do certain things that are not entirely safe from a script writing standpoint. There are a few things that happen, and I won't spoil them for you. There's a few things that happen in this movie that kind of surprised me. And when those things happen, they contributed a bit of an emotional kick, to keep things engaging. After the film was over, I still felt something. There was a little bit of an emotional resonance left over after the film ended. And it kind of lingered in my mind a little bit, and I thought about the film, throughout the rest of the day. So that's a good thing. This is not, I don't think this movie is just like a brainless thriller where you just kind of go with it and then you forget it instantly when it's over. It does have a little bit of a dramatic impact to it, and I like that. At first, The Dawning Rage feels a little less intense and violent than this director's prior films. He directed The Man from Nowhere, right, and No Tears for the Dead, which get pretty intense. But, don't worry, because there are some suspenseful and violent moments in The Dawning Rage to enjoy as well. It's just not as high as octane. There's not as many, standout like action fights and stuff like that in this. But unlike some of this director's prior films, our protagonist here is not a good fighter. Sun-kyun Lee's character, he's not a good fighter in this. Even though he's a cop, he's always outmatched when he's fighting with the bad guys, which is kind of an interesting decision from the director's standpoint. He really needs to dig deep to win a fight in this movie, and I kind of appreciated that. It upped the stakes a little bit. Now, one negative to this film is that the bad guys, they're wafer thin. You know, and they're not developed really at all. They're just mustache-twirling psychopaths, you know what I mean? They're basically cardboard cutouts with no depth. I kind of wish there was a little bit more multidimensionality to those bad guys, but you know, regardless, there is a hitman who consistently stalks our protagonist, and he is memorable even though his character's not that developed, so at least that was a good thing, and he shows up multiple times. So, really, when all is said and done, Jo Pil-ho, The Dawning Rage, is a good movie, you know, with solid performances that, you know, would serve as good introductions to both of these lead actors, if you're unfamiliar with them. So, yeah, this one kind of surprised me a little bit, just because it dropped on Netflix. It's available on Netflix streaming in the US. I didn't even hear about this movie before it dropped on Netflix. I'm like, what is this? You know what I mean? And I watched it, and it was good, so I recommend it. If you got some time, check this one out. It's a good flick. And as always, I'll see you next time.